Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Albena, and I'm the Program Manager of the Microsoft Reactor San Francisco. I will be sharing session resources with you in the chat, but before we begin, I would like to quickly review two items with you, our Code of Conduct and our event guidelines. First, please take a moment to review our Code of Conduct. Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and our presenters. We do encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. And secondly, our event guidelines. This session is being recorded and will be available on demand through the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel in about 24 to 48 hours. I'll be sharing the link in the chat for our YouTube channel, and if you have not been on a live stream through YouTube before, please know that you must create an account on YouTube in order to access and interact in the chat. You can set that up right now, and if you're unable to use the chat but have questions, feel free to reach out to us through the social media or meetup. Which brings us to today's session, Linux on Azure, what is it, how, and when to use it. This session will run approximately for 60 minutes, and I'm going to bring in our speaker, Gwen, and our guest, Rishabh, as well. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Albina, as always, for the wonderful introduction. Hi, everyone. I see a couple people in the chat hanging out with us already. Awesome. Let us know where you are checking in. Also, do let me know if you were on our session last week where we talked all about how Linux works. And today we're going to take it a step further and talk a little bit more about utilizing Linux on Azure. And I have my friend Rishabh here. He wasn't on the, let's switch to this. He wasn't on the the series information of the page, or when you register, you probably didn't see his name because last minute I was like, I really want to talk about an app that we have in production that is utilizing Linux and it's on Azure. And it's an effort by both of us. It's called Learn to Cloud. Some of you may or may not have heard of it. So no one better than talk about these things with than himself. So hey, Rishabh, how you doing?
I'm doing good. And I guess most of the people know us as the duo, right? The cloud duo. So
we do a lot together, yeah.
Yeah. We are back. And I think this is my first Reactor stream for this year.
Oh wow, I'm honored. Yeah, you do a lot with the Reactor too as well. Rishabh does a whole bunch of other stuff, not always with me. But yeah, for today, I want to dive a little bit more onto Linux on Azure. We're going to talk a little bit more about open source, and then the history of open source at Microsoft, which was pretty interesting to read about. But we're going to keep these things at high level. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about utilizing Linux on Azure. Then we're going to demo a little bit about, again, showcasing our use of Linux on Azure. And then also, I'm going to do this right now because this might take a while. So are you all familiar with the Azure Developer CLI? Azure Developer CLI. I don't know if anyone's used it before. Also, I just got access to the Bing chat thing with OpenAI.
Oh, nice.
So freaking cool. But anyway, so the Azure Developer CLI, it's a CLI that will enable you to essentially deploy full-on production-ready applications to Azure with a simple command. And they have a bunch of templates. I asked Savannah, who is the PM for the Azure Developer CLI, because I know a lot of their templates are, I want to open up one of these templates. A lot of their templates are based off of like Linux images. So if we look on like the C#, I know these app service ones are based off Linux images. And I know the one for the C# and Azure Functions is also because I helped author that one, but they also have like Java, Node.js, Python. And I want to pick, I don't know, let's pick this Java one as an example. It's based off container apps. And I asked her like, well, so what was the reasoning, or can you give me like a statement? Because I want to share with the people watching the stream. I was like, what was the reasoning behind, basing these templates off all like Linux images? And then Savannah's great. She's one of the funniest and coolest people to talk. But she basically was like, honestly, Linux is where the people is at. So that's super straightforward. I was like, I'm going to use that because it's just the truth. It's like, we'll see a couple more stats about why that sort of like back up the statement at first, but I'm going to do this deployment first because it's probably going to take a while. Oh, look at this, WSL, which is Linux on Windows. And then we're going to make we're going to call this how Linux works demo. And then we're going to cd into this.
Love the directory name.
Yeah, love it. And then we'll just do azd up. And we're going to call this, let's just call it reactor demo.
Cool.
It's also way too big. And the reason I'm running this now is because it might take a few moments, and I don't want us to wait towards the end because we might have a lot too. Oh my goodness. Oh, Docker's not running. If I run Docker, will it give me issues? Because this is using container apps, so obviously the Docker technology needs to be running. Give me a second. I will get this running, and then we'll run this command again, and as long as it's running in the background, we should totally be fine. I do want to add, while we're waiting, you think Linux, you got to think Bash. If you're not familiar with Bash, lucky for you, today we released Bash for Beginners. We can drop the link into the chat for you all, but it is 20 videos. I think the longest one might be 11, but the majority of them are anywhere from like 5 to 6 minutes long. It covers all your fundamentals for learning Bash, utilizing Bash in the context of like scripting for CLIs and things like that. I think this is running now. Okay. And it's free. It's on YouTube. I helped author that as well, so be sure to check that out. And we're going to hit yes here. And I think this is going to provision. Okay, cool. All right, back to the content here. So anyway, open source. Switch over here. Switch this way, actually. I think it's this one here. Okay.
There's someone in the chat who said, I was just going through the Bash course before this stream started. Perfect timing.
I got people multitasking. Yeah. Oh, I wanted to... Okay, just to back up that point that I was saying, and I shared this on Twitter earlier today. But, so, when we think of Linux and we think of cloud, so cloud has done like this amazing job of abstracting like networking, programming, hardware, security to an extent. And then, the cloud is nothing more than a bunch of beautiful Linux servers networked together, right? But that doesn't mean that you need to know how Linux works. Like, for example, all the stuff that we covered in the session last time, kernel, user space, the file system, how things boot. Like, those things are interesting to know for sure. If you're a nerd and you like to know like what's under the engine and whatnot, but it's absolutely not necessary when you're trying to like work in the cloud, right? But the cool thing is like realizing like, okay, so this is a chart that I kind of quickly made today is like, we have the services on this, our y-axis, and then the level of Linux extraction on the x-axis. So when we think about like knowing the absolute most about Linux, which would be like the lower level, Bash is definitely useful there. But you go like a level up and you're working with like virtual machines, and the Bash is useful there too. You go a level higher, you're thinking like Azure Kubernetes service, or something like that, where it's like a managed service, but you still get access. You can get access to like the underlying infrastructure if you needed to, like mess with the APIs or whatnot. Bash is useful there too. But then if you go like a level up higher, I put like container apps here. Coincidentally, I'm using that for the demo as well. But if you do like functions, and then you can swap these out for whatever their equivalents are in any cloud. It doesn't really matter. I just know the Azure one, so I put them there. Like CLI skill set, Bash PowerShell skill set here, and like no matter what service you throw at, what level of abstraction you throw it at, it's going to be very useful. So hopefully people find that something to add. I think you can probably get through the whole thing just watching it in like 2 hours or so, and then obviously it's going to take you some time to get hands-on and whatnot. But I think you could spend like a weekend and get pretty comfortable there as well. So keep that in mind. Okay, cool. Back to what I was actually supposed to talk about today. So what is open source? A very brief, I guess, one-liner on the topic is, so it's primarily assimilated with like software, but I know there are other products that like like literature and things like that that are also associated with open source. But primarily, when we speak about open source, we're talking about software, code, projects related to code, and things like that. Where the source code, so if you think of like an application, whatever makes up the application, because ultimately, like the program, everything comes down to code, is made available for anyone to use, modify, and share freely. So that's pretty much just like the most vague
definition kind
like,
of. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then some examples. So for example, VS Code, Docker, Kubernetes, SQL Server. I put Learn to Cloud there. Free Code Camp is an example of, because they open source all their curriculum, so that is an example of not necessarily being software, but it is tied to something like that. So they also open source. I think they might be one of the largest GitHub repos also, like in terms of popularity, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you say that it can be, it just doesn't have to be software. It can be, educational content. It can be, your notes and like tools that you build.
Yeah, exactly.
So everything can be part of this ecosystem that we know as of open source. Cool.
Absolutely. We have a couple comments here that I wanted to address. The same can be said for PowerShell plus a bunch more. I would agree. Yeah, that's why I was trying to say like CLI in general, like a CLI skill set in general. PowerShell is not built into Linux, so not recommended. So this is where like the bonus point goes to Bash, where it's like essentially a universal language. Like a lot of Linux distros cover Bash from like scratch. You don't have to install it. Like I mean, even Python sometimes comes, but it's not like a guarantee.
Now I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, like Bash is like you can go in there and use it without having like any additional dependencies. But both are great, right? So cool. We were talking about, some more open. So yeah, we've gone through some examples here. More open source facts. And also I would just like to say, this isn't a PowerShell versus Bash. Like one is better. You shouldn't learn the other one. If you know anything about like my background as someone who delivers technical content I truly don't care what people select. I really just want you to learn whatever it is that is going to enable you to land a job or upskill. And that oftentimes is sort of reverse engineering, like a job description or whatever it is. I just tend to like to cover things around the stuff that I like. So Bash, Azure, and whatever. But ultimately, if you decide to go learn PowerShell and AWS, which would be an interesting combination, more power to you. I don't really enjoy these like AWS versus Azure or like these like
the debates.
Conversations. Yeah, the debates or conversations that tend to go viral, and I'm sure that's not where I like to dedicate my time. But anyway, okay, cool. So that's kind of like sort of high level talking about like open source. Can be used for commercial, non-commercial purposes, often distributed for free, but it's not always. Like it could be open source but have some sort of cost associated to it. Maybe it's not directly through like paying for access to it or something like that, but it's often associated free with open source. Whether that is good or not is a totally different type of question, but that's just the way that it is, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where, we would have to like dive really deep into like licensing and stuff. There are different kind of open source licenses, like where you can not fork the repo and customize it into some way where you make it profitable. But yeah. I hope the audience get the point that, it can be free, but there might be some gray area with certain softwares.
Yeah, and also just because something is free, not necessarily, again, the licensing detail really does matter, because it's not like, just because it's free, I can reutilize it for absolutely anything. No, but that would require a whole different type of talk where you can write a book on different licensings. Yeah. So typically, this is also another important. These last two are very important too. Typically developed and maintained by a community or individual. Sometimes it's just there's that funny meme where it's like a bunch of, I don't remember what it is, but a bunch of things stacked, where it's like these massive corporations, and at the bottom it's like one tiny brick that's holding absolutely everything up, and it's like one library that's maintained by a single person.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? I think I saw it earlier too.
I've seen that
or something like that. And it's like, the reality is a lot of like packages or applications, libraries, things like that are used in like a lot of like web are often open source and maintained by a small amount of people or a single person. But there is a bigger push I've noticed to get support from companies or organizations that do utilize open source to, continue backing these projects, GitHub sponsors and things like that. It does need to be significantly more, for sure.
Yes.
But it's getting better. So those are some interesting open source facts there. Let's talk more about open source at Microsoft, which was quite an interesting thing to read about. Now, just for context, I joined Microsoft about a year and a half ago, so I'm way into like the Satya Nadella phase, way into like Microsoft embracing Linux, Microsoft embracing open source. But I know it hasn't always been around here. I've like the privilege to be around a lot of people who have had like 15, 20 years of being at Microsoft, and then they like will tell me firsthand from firsthand experience, like it used to not be like this. Like the culture was completely different. Now at Microsoft, we're definitely at a place where it's like open first, and then there needs to be a discussion whereas if something needs to be closed or not open source. Instead, it used to be like close first. We'll consider open source later on, right? So I'm curious to know about other people's experience with Microsoft technologies or with Microsoft in general. Like what era did you start using Microsoft or know about Microsoft technologies, and have you seen the shift as well? So let me know about that, right? So anyway, beginnings. I like to classify this as the wrong side of history, and I have like two phrases here that kind of stick out that I wanted to share. These are quotes. This is not something I'm saying. Do not cut this up.
Yeah.
Say that I said. So Linux is a cancer that attaches itself in an intellectual property sense to everything it touches. So this was by an ex-CEO of Microsoft, Steve Ballmer, and this article is called talking about like Linux is a cancer, and this was like early 2000s, I believe, or mid 2000s, around that time. If you Bing, if you search this with ChatGPT, you'll probably get a lot more information around a lot of articles. This was covered extensively, pretty interesting, right? Another thing that I saw in this talk that's called, it's like an MIT talk, the second one here, a conversation with Microsoft President Brad Smith. Microsoft was on the wrong side of history when open source exploded at the beginning of the century, meaning that, our position against open source, against Linux in general, wasn't the right one. Because when you think of open source and you think of what it stands for, the culture around it, like the end results and things like that, it's like very, very powerful and very, very enabling. And when you think of like technology and the things that can change because of embracing that type of culture, obviously being against it, it's just like not the right move from any viewpoint, right? So some interesting dates when it comes to I guess Microsoft's relationship with open sources. 2001, bad attempt at open sourcing .NET. If you're familiar, .NET is this entire ecosystem. It was originally made by Microsoft to develop like desktop apps, web applications, and things like that. And in 2001, essentially what they did was like they grabbed .NET and they pulled a lot of stuff out of it, and then they sort of open sourced the rest of it. But a lot of the stuff that they took out was like really important and really useful types of things. So that's why I put bad attempt at open sourcing .NET. In 2009, they began contributing to the Linux kernel, which I was surprised. It's earlier than I thought. 2012, I mean, there's a lot more that happens between, like, there's multiple things that happen in many of these years, but I just sort of cut out the ones that kind of stuck out to me. Me being someone who works in the Azure space, works in the .NET space, works in the cloud native space and whatever, okay? So, 2012, Azure begins hosting Linux virtual machines. That is a lot later than I thought. And when you start to think like the AWS market share versus the Azure market share, having the Linux virtual machine images available in 2012 definitely contributed to that. Obviously, AWS was around earlier, but I feel like when Azure started, and if you immediately had these images available, you could have gained a little bit of leverage there. But so be it. History is already a thing there. 2014, full .NET is open source and the .NET Foundation is created. And then the notorious quote from Satya Nadella, Microsoft loves Linux, it becomes a thing. And, that is quoted all the time now. And is a big part of like the open source culture now at Microsoft. It's just like, you're reminded constantly, Microsoft loves Linux. Cool. 2015, Visual Studio Code released, and then they released with a Linux build as well, which I think is important. Also, I think about just the adoption that Linux, that Visual Studio Code has had is 100% thanks to releasing a Linux build and making it available cross-platform. Whereas like you compare like the adoption of Azure versus like Visual Studio Code only with a couple of years apart, right? You see, so it just goes to show that that part of the community has always been very important. 2016, WSL is announced. Microsoft joins the Linux Foundation. And PowerShell is open sourced. Shout out to all my PowerShell fanatics in there. But it's also open source. 2017, I think WSL was also a massive, massive move. We're going to talk more about WSL in the next session. We're going to talk all about getting started with WSL. I want to talk a little bit about the architecture as well, because I think it's just fascinating how it went from WSL to WSL2. So the just was like a quick like one liner is WSL was essentially using some sort of like we could call it like emulation or like whereas like WSL2 has a full like Linux kernel. So very big difference there.
Yeah.
If you don't know really much about what the Linux kernel is, it's code that sits in main memory when your machine is running, and its goal is to assign the next task to the CPU, and the CPU will go to main memory and kind of work with those tasks, right? So obviously having that in WSL2 is a game changer. But anyway, 2017, Microsoft joins the Open Source Initiative and the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF, which is the foundation that is in charge of essentially like pushing, promoting, supporting all of these open source projects that are around cloud native technologies.
Yeah.
So like Kubernetes is probably one of the biggest ones there. But like Microsoft has a lot of technologies in there too, like functions and things like that as well. Another massive move. Let's move around here. 2018 GitHub acquisition. Big move when you think of like open source, where to host your code. Like you think GitHub, right? There are a bunch of other players there too. There's like GitLab, there's Bitbucket, right? But GitHub is just it has like market share there. And then WSL2 with an actual Linux kernel is released in 2018 too. So this was also a couple of years ago. Like I don't know why I still get the feeling of like it was only a couple of years ago, but no. This is,
I felt like this was more recent, and now that we're in 2023, it's like 5 years. Oh my god.
Yeah. This is an interesting point here. Don't forget about Sublime and Atom, but VS Code has pretty much taken over. Brackets was abandoned. I remember Atom had like had some great momentum.
Yes.
And I think it was like that first move towards a more like lightweight, more customizable type of editor, and then VS Code just
definitely. Yeah. I think that's what I got, like just talking about the experience, like I used Atom before, and then as soon as VS Code came in, it gave me more power in a certain sense, but the adaptability was still easy, right? Because the other IDEs, I get that it just makes beginners or like people who are starting too overwhelmed with all the buttons and
just
features.
think about Visual Studio. I have been using .NET for let's say 2018, so since the GitHub acquisition, and I open Visual Studio and I'm like, I have no idea. So I use VS Code. Given, I guess what's different is my experience with .NET has always been like, after it's been open source, so a lot of like cloud native functionality. So we're thinking like serverless, all that. Like my experience with .NET was serverless first, and I didn't do any of like .NET framework things or anything like that. Where Visual Studio is like a massive game changer. But when I open it, I'm like, this is a lot. This is way too much. A lot. I enjoy VS Code a lot more. But again, different tools for different types of jobs, right? 2019, Visual Studio Code releases as a snap, which is a way of installing packages. Like you have like Snap Store or like Snap CLI tool where you can install packages in what is it, Ubuntu based distribution?
Yes.
Snap. Yeah, cool. Which is important because when you think of how you install things via CLI, like Mac has Brew. It's one of the more popular ones. Yeah, Homebrew, where you do like brew install and you find the package that you want to install. Windows has WinGet. What's the other one?
That's game changing too. Yeah.
What's the other
Chocolatey, I think, prior to
Oh, Choco. Yeah.
Choco. Yeah.
Yeah, there might be another one. I think Windows has lagged in that aspect of like being
package
able to install
management.
things.
Yeah.
Because like Brew has been great forever, but then you think of like Linux and you have Snap, you have like apt-get, so many different options. But like the thing about being a different Linux distro is like different ones will have different use.
Their own,
their own, right? And embracing the ones that the majority of the users in that distro are using it shows that you care. It shows that you're not like ignoring. You're not just doing what favors you as a company. So embracing something like Snap is very, very important. And then Linux surpasses Windows usage on Azure. Very important. So when you think of Azure, you might think like, oh, it's a bunch of like Windows technology and like it's Windows servers and you're going to be stuck on Windows 2008 R2 or something like that. No. Linux actually is the most popular type of infrastructure when it comes to usage on Azure, and that will bring us over to the open first mindset. So like I mentioned, we went from going to Linux is a cancer to Linux is like the most popular thing used on Azure, and this whole like shift in mindset, right? So Linux on Azure, a couple of interesting stats that I found. 50%, over 50% of VM cores that are deployed into Azure are Linux-based. Chat, can you let me know, like, if you're deploying stuff in Azure, like, is it always Linux-based? Like, I don't think I've ever deployed anything Windows-based.
For
No.
me, not in a while.
When was the last time you did?
There was a .NET Framework 4.5 app at one of the previous companies I worked for, and it needed to be moved from on-prem to, like, and it was lift and shift. That you need any kind of, any kind of creative migrations. It was just, okay, we're going to move this from a data center to a VM in the cloud. And that's where I did it back in 2019, I guess.
I guess, yeah, for supporting stuff, maybe like lift and shift, like you mentioned, you might have to. But I think anything new, the default is like people just use Linux. That's it. So, and the next stat here is 60% of Azure Marketplace images are Linux based, and over 47,000 customers using Azure open source databases. So these are things like Azure Database for Postgres. Oh, I'm missing a space here. Azure Database for MySQL. I'm missing an L here. Azure Cosmos DB. I do. Oh my goodness. Let me fix this right now because I want to make these notes available for y'all if y'all are interested. So let me just quickly fix these on the spot. Azure Cosmos DB. And there we go. So in terms of leveraging Linux, let me show you all. We were already on here before, but this is more so talking about the importance of Bash. But let me wait. Where is it here? Yeah. So if we hold on, I don't want to erase this, but yeah. So in terms of leveraging Linux, like you don't have to start right here. Like you're like, if you are like a new company or like a new developer trying to leverage this technology in Azure, you don't have to always do like a VM or even like AKS. Like I think a very maybe like a good first starter would be like go and see like the highest level of abstraction services, like what they have to offer. Yeah. And then if you need any more granular access, or you need more customization for whatever, or you need to manage something more and like a managed service won't work for you, then kind of move your way down the ladder to like, okay, so maybe like Azure Container Apps, like you need more access to the underlying infrastructure, go AKS. If you can't do AKS, go to like standard Kubernetes deployed on virtual machines or something like that. But try to start more up here, mainly because you're not going to be in charge of a lot of stuff that makes a lot of these things tedious, right? I'm pretty sure there's a lot of Kubernetes admins out there that are like, I wish I wouldn't have to. I wish we could have this managed, and then they could dedicate themselves more to the business logic, more to the fun stuff. I'm sure there's people out there that like it too, but maybe if like start up in here. I think for situations like a lift and shift, it might be more difficult. You typically end up utilizing VMs for that kind of stuff. Yeah. But a lot of the cloud native stuff starts up here anyway, right? So let's see. So let me see if this thing is done deploying. Okay, looks like it did. So our API service is here. I actually haven't used this image before or template before, so let's see what happens when we load it up. And then I'm gonna open up my portal as well. So it said to do app, and nice. I'm gonna go to portal.
And it's in Java, right?
Yeah, so it's written in Java. We're gonna actually open up the template here. So it's written in Java. So this is our source for our API here. I don't really know too much about Java, so where would I find it? In here, source, main. Oh my goodness, there's so many. Oh, no, that's not it. There's so many.
Yeah, I think it's the to do.
Okay, here it is. I'm starting to find some .java files. That's the one thing about Java that is all the scaffolding is hard to get, especially if you're coming from maybe like a Python background or something like that. Getting into into all the like scaffolding might be a little straightforward. Not as straightforward, but anyway. So yeah, it is a Java code. And then if we go into the infra and then we go into like the core, we can see it's probably host. I want to see where it's calling a Linux-based image. Yeah, here we go. So this is Bicep. For those who are not familiar, Bicep is an abstraction on top of ARM, which stands for Azure Resource Manager. ARM is JSON that is, it's the way to interact with the Azure API. Azure is essentially a massive API, and that's how you create resources and things like that. But working with JSON is notoriously difficult. I'm not sure if y'all have worked with JSON, but it's more so a language that's great for work from computers working to computers or computers talking with computers. It's not very human friendly to look at. So then they came up with this awesome thing called Bicep, which has been around for I think a couple of years, which is an abstraction on top of it, and it's ways for you to like this is a lot more friendly than working with straight up JSON, right? So you have like parameters, and you've got like there's a lot you can make it as modular as possible. But anyway, yeah, they are basing this off this app service plan based off Linux, right? So the API has deployed. Look at all this Swagger Open API here.
Nice.
You can hold on. Let's take a look at this. So you have an items, and you have lists, list API, items API. You got your schema there, and then you have your front end here. And then I'm gonna open this up in the portal, and we'll take a look at it in a second. But if I write down here, I have to fix blog post. I just want to see how it works. Fix blog post. That is actually a task that I have to do. And then if I click on here, I can do in progress, I think. Due date. When is this due? Let's say let's do. I think they told me it's due on Monday, so we'll save that there. Completed. Okay, cool. And then you can have, I think, additional lists. So like maybe we call this content, and then we create like shopping. I don't know. Shopping.
I just love that how the UI is really similar to Azure portal.
Oh, that's right. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I'm like, I've seen this.
You're right. I wonder if they. I bet they did it on purpose. They're smart. That's smart. I gotta ask Savannah if they did it on purpose. Where's like? Oh, can I move? Can I move this? Hold on. How do I move this? Can I? No, I can't. Interesting. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, it's a to-do list, right? So if I probably refresh my API, and then I go to items, I guess get the items. Can I just run this? I don't feel like I need to put anything in. Try it out. Oh, hold on. No, this is not the right one. List, item ID, items. No, I just want to get all the items. Or maybe let's get all the lists first. Okay, because is that. Try it out. Execute. Why? Lists ID. Oh, get a specific list. Oh, here we go. Sorry, that was the wrong one. Okay. Got it. Now we'll do this here. Cool. So we're seeing that it does a curl. And then we have our lists that we just created. My list, content, description. So if I grab let's grab the shopping one. Let's grab this ID. So now I can list items by, let's see, lists, list ID, items. I just want lists. This one here. List ID. Try it out. Paste this in here. Execute. And then I have my items, bananas. Cool. So it works. And hold on a second. Let me log in first without everyone looking at my email address. Yeah, and I didn't do anything. All I did was run. Let me share my thing again.
AZD template name and then up.
AZD up. Oh my goodness, I have to run all the way to the top of this. I did this AZD up dash template to do dash Java dash Mongo dash ACA, which stands for Azure Container Apps. And it asked me for a couple of parameters, and I didn't have Docker running, so there's that. I'm going to delete it in a little bit, but let me show you what it looks like in the portal. So yeah, you can essentially deploy something with one command straight to Azure. Now, what did I call it? Does anyone remember? Reactor demo, I think. Yeah, cool. So let's take a look at what actually gets deployed here. So remember I talked about the level of abstraction? Like obviously you're not going to see like type like Linux, right? But it's like a container app. We have one container app, two container apps, container app environment. We've got a Cosmos DB for, this uses MongoDB. Nice. Container registry, it's deployed also a shared dashboard, Key Vault, log analytics, workspace, and application insights. Let's open one of these. Let's open this environment thing here. Let's go on to, Dapper components. I need to look at, like, where do I find the image that it's based? That is a good question. Maybe it's the container.
I think it should be. I know what the developer CLI does, but I just don't know like I know it uses Bicep, but I don't know if it creates like a new container image to.
It should. It'd be based off. So this is the image.
Oh,
here it is.
There we go.
Right here. Perfect. Thanks. Right. So anyway, a bunch of resources get deployed thanks to that. Someone said here, Terraform does the same thing. It's just cross-platform and independent. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
ARM Bicep is like cloud formation. Correct. Yes, it is an infrastructure as code tool, IAC. But Bicep is just the one that actually the developer template uses
Bicep in the
Bicep
backend, right?
in the backend, but it also has support for Terraform, I believe. Let me look here. Use Terraform right here. So you can use Terraform or Bicep. Like again, this pushes the whole mindset of like, we're going to embrace what the people want. People want Linux. People want Terraform. We're going to do it. Obviously, we're going to start with like the stuff that we know the most because, if you want to like develop stuff quickly, that's where you're going to head to, right? But then we're going to embrace what the people want. All right. So I wanted to talk to you all about, and this is why I brought Rich up here. So how we actually leverage, hold on. No, we can start here. So I stuck the Learn to Cloud logo here. I don't know if people are familiar with Learn to Cloud. It is an open source guide to learn the fundamentals of cloud computing. And it probably sits, like if we go back here, in the context of web, like you could have a VM and then you probably have something like a static site maybe on blob storage. And then you can have something up here like Azure Static Web Apps. So we decided to go like, let's go as high top in terms of abstraction as we can because we're two people maintaining this website on our free time. We get like, do you have data on how many users we get?
Yep. Yep, I do have it. So for context, last year we had 73,000 users and around 150K sessions, so 150,000 sessions on our website, which was earlier just a static page hosted on GitHub Pages. So not, best performant SEO optimized thing, right? And for this year, since we moved, as Gwen was saying, to static web apps, right? And then I'm guessing Gwen will talk more about the architecture side of things. For January itself, we had 6,000 users. We had around 12,000 sessions for just 1 month. And sorry, my bad. That's for, oh my God, okay. 6,000 users only for February. And we are just halfway through February.
Oh my goodness. Okay, let's just do Feb here. Feb 2023. And then, wait, what were the stats for 2022?
73,000 users.
73,000 users. How many sessions?
150K.
150. I would just do 150K. So for all the whole year, and then now we're at Azure Static Web Apps. Just the month of February, we have 6,000 users and 12,000 sessions.
Yeah, that's like 15 days.
Yeah. So we get some traffic. That's what I'm trying to say. And we've been able to sort of maintain this with very, very little management upkeep. Like a lot of the work we've been doing is implementing stuff like GitHub Actions, building APIs, like a lot of the fun stuff, and we haven't really been worried about our traffic or scaling or anything like that. So here's like, this is my portal. This is where I log into every single day, and I check like some site hits. As you can see, like for the past, I don't know, we'll take a look at. Site hits are not the same as site visits, I should say, but it kind of gives you an idea of like, like what kind of traffic you're getting. Like let's look at the last like 7 days. In the last 7 days, an average, hold on, where did it go? 127,430 site hits. And then we also have an API running that serves our cloud dictionary, which I'll show you in a second as well. And just so we can get a feel for we'll do like, I don't know how long I've had this. Hold on. We're going to do last 7 days. So compare the same. We've had 4,000. Wow, that is surprising. 4,760 hits to this API in the last 7 days. So again, just so you can get a feel for what kind of traffic we're working on. For context, why don't I have it in my history? Learn to Cloud. This is the site that we maintain. That thing that loaded right here, this is actually the API. So what gets refreshed here, like that traffic that I showed you, which was like 4,000 something, is this little box that fills in here. So if I refresh this, I feel like it's an ambulance coming. Hold on. You want to talk about this while I mute myself?
Sure. Yep. So the box that you see in the middle where it says here's a random cloud definition, it calls the API that Gwen has built and is hosted in Azure Functions every time you refresh the page so that you get a random cloud definition.
Thank you.
Okay.
I forgot to close my window. That's why it said loud. My mistake. Yeah, but anyway, we have this API here. People can contribute if you're interested in contributing. It's a very low-hanging fruit way of contributing to open source. You can hit submit a definition. It'll take you to GitHub, right? The rest of, I guess, the meat and potatoes of the site itself is if you click on guide, it'll guide you through essentially what I like to call the pillars of getting into cloud engineering, and it's a guide written by the both of us, taken from the experiences that we did coming from like non-traditional educational backgrounds, meaning we didn't go to college, and then working our way into a cloud role. And sort of, if we look back at it, how would we sort of distill this information in sort of like a roadmap or a guide, right? So what it is we have like different phases. We talk about Bash and the importance of networking, programming fundamentals, cloud platform fundamentals, DevOps fundamentals, and cloud security fundamentals. And if you just sort of work your way through each phase will give you like, why does this phase matter in the context of cloud? Like, how do you break this down? Some resources that we recommend. We try to keep a lot of these, resources, open source and free. Some of them might be paid, but I don't think there's anything over like $100. And I think that appeal of it being like an open source, like a compilation of open source types of information is also what encourages others to like give it a shot, because we're not selling anything. There's no charge. This isn't a boot camp or something like that. It's more so to empower. It's more so to empower people to go and learn, right? So again, you got to feel for the projects and then things that you should be familiar at, so you can test your knowledge and certifications that might be useful and all that kind of stuff, right? We have a page for projects where you can look at individual projects if you want to get hands-on. More study resources are in here. So okay, right. We have this is a new addition, a search we can search for here. What else do we have here? We have a roadmap. In terms of like the content that's on here, that's pretty much what we're working with. But yeah, we get a decent amount of traffic, and all of this is hosted on. So let's go in here. I have so many groups to clean up. I need to do better at this. Everything is hosted inside of one resource group. It's called RG-Learn to Cloud because we're very creative. And the meat and potatoes is this static web app. We are paying for a premium plan. So I think there's like a free tier for static web apps, which for probably the majority of people, if it's like a personal site or something like that, the free tier is more than enough. But we figured that given the kind of traffic that we're getting, we most likely needed to host something with a little bit more power and scalability and things like that. So we decided to go with it. I think it's like starts at $10 a month, something like that, and then it will.
I think so, yeah.
You have additional costs depending on like certain parameters and whatnot. We also have what do we have in here? Environments.
Yep, we have a staging environment.
Yeah, I'm going to open up our GitHub. We encourage new people or just, I don't know, people trying to get hands-on in general to contribute to the project as much as we can. So let me open up our project. So we have a backlog here with just things that we're working on. And the preview part, the staging parts, I'll show you in a little second, is really, really helpful for us to get other people to help to work on these things with us. So for example, we're going to have to add some more tickets through because we're looking a little low here.
Yes.
Go ahead.
We just finished our first sprint of the year, and that's why it's looking like very less issues. I think we had we had like 13 or 14 issues open last month, and we just went through them. And there were a lot of community members too who participated in helping us, clean this up. So I'll add some more issues that we plan on having in Learn to Cloud.
Yeah. Oh, I also forgot to add that we have several languages.
Yes.
English, French, Portuguese, and what's the last one?
Nepali.
So that is a community contribution as well. So anyway, we have our backlog, right? So we try to contribute as much as we can to get others to help out and get hands-on. And this cool part is, you want to talk about, because this is also Linux-based, our workflows?
Yep, sure.
Which one should I open?
The workflows folder.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, and which one?
And then static web apps is good.
Cool.
Yeah, so this also runs on a container. So if you don't know what GitHub Actions are, they are basically CI/CD, like they help you enable CI/CD on your open source project. So there's a generous free tier. I think I don't remember the numbers correctly, but I believe there are like 2,000 minutes for a public repo for a month, and basically you can run GitHub Actions to either build or deploy your websites, artifacts, releases. We use GitHub Actions for three things. One of them is publishing to our Azure static web apps. Whenever a new pull request is merged to the staging branch, then it goes to the staging environment. And if it goes to the main branch, that's a release. And we use Ubuntu latest as our container. As you can see right on the line 17, it says runs on Ubuntu latest. So it uses that container to do a bunch of actions, steps, jobs that we need to build this. So this is based on DocuSource, which is, again, an abstraction from React. So this uses React. And so whenever we do npm run build, which you might be familiar with, that runs on an Ubuntu container. So yeah, we are using Linux here too.
Yeah. So this deploys to Azure, which uses Linux to host the site. What else do we have? What is this CodeQL thing?
So CodeQL it also runs on Ubuntu. Everything runs on Ubuntu latest for our actions. This just does a code scanning, so no malicious PRs or no malicious code is merged to our beautiful open source project, because we don't want that. And every time a new PR is created, this just does analysis, and it's a tool made available from GitHub.
Very cool. Yeah, and let me see. It's kind of all the, I guess it's, we have work queued up to leverage Linux stuff. So for example, let me go to our project here.
Yeah, I was going to say we have dev container support now, so that...
Oh, we do.
Yes.
We do. For those who aren't familiar, dev container is another abstraction on top of Linux.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, it emulates so if you use like VS Code, you open up a dev container, and what it does is your VS Code will act as if it exists in whatever environment you've described in your dev container. So you don't have to install things locally. You don't have to generally across your entire system. And I think of maybe like one of the best examples is how Python uses environments,
yes,
virtual environments.
Virtual environments, yeah.
Dev containers essentially would replace that kind of functionality, right?
Yeah, and it's like for the complete project. And like especially when we saw that there's so much community contribution, we wanted it to be easy for people to like onboard and clone the repo and like just get started working with, and they don't have to deal with npm packages, broken dev dependencies. So I think that was the thought behind it.
Absolutely. And here is where our API lives. Our API is, let me actually show you all that. Where is that? RG Cloud Dictionary. Our API. Watch it be on a Linux-based, like a Windows-based image. Okay, so we're using Linux once again for our API that powers our function, our Cloud Dictionary. We have, in this function app, we have a couple endpoints here, and then people can contribute to that versus, we have to automate this. The issue I'm coming into with this, like people will submit their definitions in like a JSON format. I manually have to look at them, and then we can add it to we have an endpoint to create a definition. So we just send it as post. But the issue is like we could easily automate this with a GitHub action, again, Ubuntu based type of action, but I don't know of a good way to avoid plagiarism. Because what I do is like I read the definition that they've provided, and then I kind of like search the internet like really quick and see if it's literally like a copy paste from somewhere else, and I'll be like, I don't want this is something valid. Like it needs to be a definition that you've come up with originally. So I don't really know how we can automate that. I'm thinking we could potentially leverage durable functions to help the process a little bit, but I still think there's going to be manual intervention, which...
Yeah. I think like the first part of the problem that you mentioned with GitHub Actions can be done, and we can still have that manual check where you go in and see if nobody is copying and pasting. But as soon as you hit merge pull request, like adding it to the the database is done automatically by a GitHub action. And then we can figure out if there are APIs that exist for, sentiment analysis and plagiarism that we can leverage to perform certain checks before it's merged.
Once OpenAI API is available, we can just say like, is this copied from somewhere? And if it gives us a yes or no, we can do it off of that. That would be pretty sick. That pretty much covers what I wanted to talk about Linux on Azure. Again, there's so many more potentials. I just used the use case of like Azure Container Apps with Java, and then our own use case, which Azure Static Web Apps, Linux-based, Azure Functions, Linux-based. But depending on like your workflow, you're going to want to probably use something different. But the options are there. Next week, we are talking about, can we make sure to drop the link session for next week? We're going to be talking about WSL. WSL is magical. Rishabh, you use WSL as well for like your day-to-day? So this is WSL. As you can see, I have the Windows terminal, and I have an Ubuntu image open here. And then if I do like, am I inside of the, yeah, I'm probably inside of this. If I just open this up like code dot here, this will also open up in the context like you see in the bottom right. It says starting VS Code in WSL. So it open up, you're essentially working within like your whatever image you're using. So in my case, Ubuntu within WSL too. Oh, it's telling me I have to install a bunch of things here too. But this is different from working off like VS Code working in Windows, because it's I mean, it is working in Windows, but it's in WSL, right?
Especially with WSL2, it's really native. Like really close to native experience.
Really close. Yeah, especially with something like what is it, System D, like the init program. But there are a couple of tools that you install like to improve this kind of experience. But we're going to be talking more about that in the next session, which is the last session for Linux related stuff. So be sure to check that out. And do we have any questions that we can talk about or answer before we leave? A lot of people were talking about. I
saw something about ARM and
a lot of people were talking about
Bicep.
The technicalities of ARM and Bicep. Always a great conversation. Let me see here. Oh, I feel like it's just like people talking to each other, which is great, answering their own questions.
Yeah.
OpenAI has an API available for a limited amount of tokens, 4K per query. The way they divide tokens is interesting too, because like one token isn't necessarily a word, and also like the more complex a word is, the more tokens it can. It's very interesting. I was reading about it yesterday, or like the day before, because we were thinking about leveraging it for some Learn to Cloud stuff. And now that I have it in my Bing, like I saw the email today. They're like, you're approved. Oh no, you're off the wait list. Like, come use Bing. So that's great. Let me see here. What do we got?
There's also a lot of comments about people want to use Mariner, the Microsoft Linux distro.
Oh,
Yeah. I don't think it's available for consumer use.
That's what AKS is built. I mean, you can go in and like build it. Like they have all the instructions if you need to, but why would you want to? Like definitely don't use it. Like definitely don't use it as like your desktop distro. Like definitely not. I don't even think it has like I mean, you could slap a UI component on top of it, but I don't see why anyone would want to do it. But I think it's like interesting to learn like the nitty gritty of how something like AKS. I don't really know what else is built on top of it. I'm pretty sure many more services, but I know AKS is. I think I saw the repo once. I was like, this is freaking cool. It's like one of those things on like your endless to do list to check out. But also, just for those who joined at the sort of later half, I mentioned Bash for Beginner series is out. We will have, hold on, let me share. We have a few more minutes. I'm going to take advantage of this to just share what we actually cover in the, let me send this over here. 1 second, I'm going to open up my screen. aka.ms bash for beginners. Did I spell that right? Yes. So 20 videos. It should take you a couple hours to get through. So the first one's just introducing ourselves, setting up the environment. We opted to go for GitHub code spaces because GitHub is free. Anyone can have a GitHub account, and then you get up to 60 hours of free code space use per month. And that is plenty to cover what we're covering in the series. But if you have Bash available to you somehow, which is probably pretty easy to get, like WSL, Ubuntu, you have Bash available. You can switch to the Bash shell on Mac OS if you want to. I think the default is like F, right? F shell? Fish shell? But if you don't want to, and you don't want to install locally, you don't want to change anything locally, you can use code spaces, and we give you instructions on that. We talk about how to get help, so man and help commands. We talk about navigating, so cd, pwd, popd, pushd commands. How to list content, how to find files, which, where is, commands like that. How to work with directories, make dir, remove dir, copy, move, things like that. View contents, more, less, tail, head, grep, environment variables. We covered env. We covered the path environment variable, export. Redirection and pipeline, grabbing the input or the output of a certain command, sending it over to another command, further filtering out that. That is the beauty in the creativity and the just plain arts of utilizing a command line, and redirection pipeline is all about that. Modifying permissions. How many times have you gone to a tutorial and you put chmod 777 without knowing what you're doing? Gone are the days of you not knowing what you're doing, because you're going to watch this video and you're going to understand what you're actually doing there too. Bash script, we talk about shebangs. Comments, we talk about commands in bash scripts, variables, how to set them, scopes, conditional statements, if then else, case statements. So that's to be the case statement to match patterns. What are functions? So how to make your code more modular functions. Parameters, defining functions. What are loops? While, until. I think there's 3 different loops in bash. We cover that as well here. And then we put it all together in that final video on how to write your bash script, where we actually deploy a resource group to Azure, which is a free thing. You're not going to pay for anything. And if you don't want to do it, don't do it. You can just watch it to get the understanding of what it actually does. 20 videos released today. I still get the comments of like, I can't believe Microsoft is doing this. Like, I did not expect this from Microsoft. It's like, yeah. And they supported me for the past couple of months, being like, yeah, go dedicate as much time as you want to go do this. So it was really, really cool.
Nice.
So hopefully people don't have any plans for the weekend and they can go watch it. Look at this. I just saw the Bash for Beginners, and amazing for a person like me. I think I've heard 3 people already that said that they're going to do the course. I'm like, wow, that is impressive. Thank you all for the endless support, and hopefully we can do more for Beginners series, depending on... I have to get a feel for what people want. I know the Bash one was one that was requested a lot, so that's why I ended up doing it. But I'll get a better feel, and we'll see. Maybe towards the end of the year, I'll spend another couple of months doing something like that. But yeah,
Nice.
Rishabh, any final words? If anyone wants to contribute to Learn to Cloud, just go to learntocloud.guide. Our roadmap is on the top.
Yep.
And we have a bunch of, and if there's something there that you don't see but you still want to help out with, let us know. We'd be happy to. We have a Discord as well to help you with that.
Especially if the issues that are there already and that is not something that you can help with, Gwen just showed you the cloud definition. So contribute to the definitions.
Submit a definition.
Yep.
10 minutes. It'll take you 10 minutes, I promise. And if you need help, submit the definition. Tell me what you need help in. I'll help you out. We check these every single day, because we don't care about work-life balance, unfortunately. All right. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out. Thank you, Rishabh, for coming on last minute. I always appreciate you. And for everyone else, I will see you next week, where we're talking about WSL2. Peace out.
Peace.